In the middle of a raging sandstorm, Ethan clutched Mary tightly and whispered, "If I die today, my love will follow you into the next life." But how did their love end up in such chaos? To understand, we must go back to the beginning. Every tragedy begins with a moment of hope. For Mary, that moment wore dust on its boots, smelled like whiskey and gun oil, and walked into Redstone just before sundown. Redstone, Texas, was a town that never washed its face. Dust clung to every porch and window like an old regret, and gossip moved faster than a prairie fire with a tailwind. The saloon at the corner Avery's Place sat low and stubborn against the wind, its swinging doors creaking like tired bones. Inside, the lamps threw a honey-colored glow across card tables where men lost small fortunes in bigger tempers. The piano was usually out of tune, the whiskey was never out of stock, and the one steady thing in that room was a young woman with a blue ribbon in her hair and a look that said she had survived more than she let on. Mary didn't belong to Redstone. Not really. She belonged to quiet morning light and promises that hadn't been made yet. But life doesn't ask where you belong, it tells you. She worked the saloon floor with calm hands and quick eyes, ducking words that bit and smiles that lied. Folks knew she was an orphan taken in by old Mrs. Avery, and they knew better than to ask about before. Redstone respected one thing: the ache a person carried, and their right to carry it alone. That evening the sky lay heavy in copper, the kind that makes a man feel he should hurry home or never go. A cattle drive had rolled through at noon, and the boys had money and thirst to burn. Laughter cracked like whips, a card game tipped loud. A bottle popped. Someone played two brave notes on the piano and then thought better of it. Mary moved through it all like the only steady wind in a room of storms, setting glasses, catching eyes, keeping peace. She'd just set a drink at the corner table when three men in trail-dusted coats crowded the bar, their talk slanting drunken and sharp. The tallest cheekbones like hatchet blades watched her with a kind of lazy hunger that turned Mary's skin cold. She took a step back, spine straight. Mrs. Avery caught her eye. "You all right?" Mary nodded once. No need to start a fire unless it already burned. That's when he walked in. He didn't rush and he didn't pose. He just filled the doorway like a shadow that had found its body. Broad shoulders beneath a worn leather coat. Dust on his boots. Hat pulled low. A thin scar cut one cheek, as if someone had once tried to erase him and failed. He looked around without hurry, the way a man does when he's taught himself never to be surprised. And then he stepped aside so the wind could slip past him and die. "Evening," he said. Voice, low gravel, that carried. Anyway. No one answered. The room had the sense to listen. He moved to the bar, nodded at Mary, and she caught the oddest flicker in his eyes. Not the appraisal men usually gave, but a question, as if he recognized some part of his own loneliness in her, and didn't know what to do with it. "What'll it be?" Mary asked. "Whatever's honest," he said, and a corner of his mouth hinted at a smile. "Whiskey'll do." She poured, the bottle glass warm under her palm. He paid with a coin that had seen better days and worse men. When their fingers almost brushed, Mary felt it a tremor in the air. Like the second before thunder. Names are strange things. They can weigh a man down or give him something to hold. He didn't offer his, and she didn't ask. Redstone had rules like that. Still, as he raised the glass, the three dusty coats at the bar slouched closer, dragging their laughter with them. "Well now," the tall one said, leaning so his breath soured the air. "You a friend of the ladies, or just keeping her warm for the evening?" The stranger took a slow sip and didn't look at him. "I'm drinking," he said. "You might try the same." Tall hatchet cheek didn't like that answer. He slid his empty glass toward Mary, the move more shove than gesture. "Pour for me first, sweetheart." Mrs. Avery stiffened behind the counter. The piano player stood up and then sat back down. The stranger's hand didn't leave his glass, but his eyes finally found the tall one's reflection in the bar mirror. A long, measuring look. A hawk deciding the shape of a rabbit. Mary lifted a bottle, voice even. We keep a polite bar. You know that. Polite? Hatchet Cheek grinned, showing teeth that had borrowed too many fights. Darlin', I'm real polite. Ask anyone. He reached out and his fingers hooked Mary's wrist, not hard at first, just enough to test the wire in her. The stranger set down his glass. He didn't shout. He didn't warn. He simply turned and stepped into the space like a door had opened for him. In one motion smooth as breath, he caught Hatchet Cheek's hand, twisted it palm out, and pressed down until bone remembered who it served. The man yelped, dropped to one knee. The stranger's other hand hovered near his holster but didn't draw. He didn't need to. Let go, the stranger said, and the words went through the room like a clean blade. Hatchet Cheek let go. His friends swore and half reached for their guns, then thought better when they saw how steady the stranger stood, feet sure, shoulders quiet, eyes clear. Men who've bled and lived learn economy. He moved only what he had to. Mary stepped back, pulse bright in her throat. For a breath, she and the stranger were the only two people in Redstone. Something fragile and necessary flickered between them, recognition maybe, or the first spark of a fire that didn't know its own size yet. Buy your boys water, Mrs. Avery said briskly, breaking the spell, and cool your heads outside. The trailmen cursed and limped toward the door, shooting looks that promised future trouble. The room exhaled. Dice rolled again. Someone laughed too loudly to prove he hadn't been scared. The stranger picked up his glass and turned back to the bar, but his gaze sought Mary's, not to claim or demand, just to make sure she was whole. You all right? He asked. I am now. She swallowed, finding her voice. Thank you? He hesitated, as if weighing whether a name was a gift or a debt. Ethan, he said finally. Mary, she answered. Mary, he repeated, as if tasting grace for the first time in a long while. He tipped the brim of his hat. Apologies for the trouble. It wasn't yours, she said. Around here, trouble doesn't need an invitation. He gave that almost smile again, tired, true. No, he said softly. It never does. Outside, the copper sky lowered another shade, and a wind came from the west, dry and restless. Somewhere far beyond the line of the horizon, the desert was rearranging itself, sand whispering over sand, dunes shifting like great sleeping animals turning in their dreams. None of them knew it yet, but that wind had begun a journey that would one day take shape around them and roar. Ethan finished his whiskey and set the glass down as if tucking a secret to bed. He slid a coin across. For the drink, he said, and for a quiet evening that won't stay quiet. Mary blinked. What do you mean? He looked past her into the mirror, not at himself but at the doorway, as if measuring exits. Whispers, he said. They travel fast, sometimes faster than a man can outrun. Mary felt cold prick her skin, though the room was warm. She didn't know his past, only that it fit him like a coat he could never take off. She didn't know her future, only that it had just noticed him and sat up straighter. Good night, Mary. He stepped away from the bar. She wanted to say something, ask where he slept, whether he'd be safe, why his eyes looked like a storm that had lost its rain. Instead, she said the only truth she had. Good night, Ethan. He paused, and for one breath, Mary was sure he'd stay. Then he walked out into the copper dusk, hat low, shoulders square, and the doors swung after him like the last words of a song that couldn't end quite yet. Mary watched the street beyond the doorway. Dust, horizon, the faintest smear of coming dark. Her heart knocked once, twice, a warning, or a welcome she couldn't tell. Behind her, the piano found a brave chord. Redstone would sleep, but rumor wouldn't. By sunrise, whispers would wrap themselves around Ethan's name like barbed wire. Train robbers, blood, betrayal. And Mary would have to choose whether to believe a stranger or the wind. Love in the Wild West doesn't arrive with roses. It steals in like a thief, carrying both promise and peril. For Mary, Ethan wasn't just a stranger anymore. He was the dangerous dream she couldn't look away from. Days turned into weeks after the saloon incident, and Ethan's name became part of Redstone's vocabulary. Some called him a hero for standing up against drunken trailhands. Others muttered darker tales, whispers of a train robbery 2 years back, a gang that vanished into the desert, with gold and blood on their hands. They said Ethan rode with them once. They said he had blood debts trailing him like shadows. Mary listened, but her heart rejected rumor. She remembered the scar, the quiet way he asked if she was all right. That wasn't the face of a butcher. That was a man who had fought something fierce inside or out and somehow survived. On a crisp evening, Mary stepped out behind the saloon to dump water from a bucket. The sky stretched wide, painted in violet dusk. There he was, leaning on the hitching post, horse grazing nearby. He tipped his hat, that half smile again. Fragile as worn leather. "You shouldn't linger here alone," Ethan said. Mary's chin lifted. "And you shouldn't appear from shadows like a ghost." He chuckled low. "Fair enough." Silence stretched. Not uncomfortable, like two people listening to the same secret. Finally, Mary asked, "Why Redstone? You could have ridden through, kept going." Ethan's gaze wandered past her shoulder to the horizon. Sometimes a man gets tired of running. Sometimes he wants to stop before the desert swallows him whole. Mary felt her pulse quicken. She should have walked back inside. Instead, she said, "If you're looking for peace, you won't find much of it here." He looked at her then. Really looked. As if she'd spoken the only truth that mattered. "Maybe peace isn't a place," he said softly. "Maybe it's a person." Her breath caught. The bucket slipped from her fingers, water spilling into dust. From that night, they began to meet at first by chance, then by intent. Under the moon's silver light on the prairie, they walked with only the sound of grass brushing their boots. Ethan spoke little, but when he did, his words carried weight, like stones set carefully on a grave. Mary found herself telling him things she had never told anyone about the ache of being parentless. The fear of growing old without love. The small, stubborn flame of hope she kept hidden. Ethan listened. Sometimes he reached out and took her hand, rough and warm, as if reminding her she wasn't alone in the wide, cruel world. One night by a campfire, Mary asked the question that had haunted her since the rumors began. "Did you ride with them? The robbers?" Ethan's jaw tightened, shadows cutting sharper across his scar. He didn't answer at first. The fire popped, spitting sparks into the night. Finally, he said, "I rode with men I shouldn't have. I was young, angry, broke, but I didn't spill blood for them. When the killing started, I walked away, or thought I did. Trouble doesn't let go so easy." Mary should have felt fear. Instead, she felt a strange kind of sorrow for the boy he had been, for the man who carried chains the world refused to see. "You're here now," she whispered. "Yes," he said, voice almost breaking. "But for how long?" In the quiet that followed, Mary leaned against his shoulder. For once, Ethan didn't pull away. He let the moment stand. Let her warmth anchor him in a world that had never offered anchors. By the time dawn streaked the sky, both knew it without saying. They belonged to each other, fragile but fierce. Yet in the Wild West, love never blooms without thorns. Even as Mary's heart opened, the desert was gathering its storm. And soon, both lover and outlaw would be tested in a trial of sand, blood, and betrayal. The desert keeps its promises in dust and silence. When it finally speaks, it speaks with wind. And that wind carries storms that can bury love and life alike. Weeks passed, and Mary's secret nights with Ethan stitched themselves into the rhythm of her days. Yet every morning, Redstone's gossip grew sharper. He's hiding something. He'll bring trouble. Mrs. Avery even pulled Mary aside one afternoon. "Child, I've seen men like him. They don't settle, they ignite." Mary said nothing. She couldn't explain that Ethan's quiet presence steadied her more than any preacher's sermon. One evening, Ethan arrived at the saloon not to drink, but to speak. His eyes carried a weight heavier than usual. "I've taken a job," he said simply. "A merchant caravan needs escort west. Pays enough to start over." Mary's heart stuttered. Start over. The words dangled like a dream just beyond reach. "Then I'm coming with you," she said, almost before she knew it. Ethan frowned. "It's dangerous. Bandits stalk the trade routes. And storms." He trailed off, gazed toward the horizon. "I've lived in danger all my life," Mary replied. "If we're to build something, let me be part of it from the start." He hesitated, but in the end, he nodded. The caravan set out under a wide, pitiless sky. 6 wagons heavy with goods, 12 men with rifles, and one woman who carried more courage than most. Dust rose in plumes, settling on clothes, throats, hearts. Ethan rode near the front, eyes scanning always, his hand never far from his gun. Mary rode beside him, clutching the saddle horn, the wind tangling her hair. For the first time, she felt not like a servant of Redstone, but like a partner in destiny. 2 days passed quietly. Too quietly. On the third, the silence broke. Gunfire split the horizon. Bandits poured over a ridge like locusts, horses kicking up rivers of dust. Their leader raised a rifle, shouting orders Mary couldn't hear but understood well enough. The caravan jolted into chaos. Wagons swerved. Men shouted. Shots cracked. Ethan barked, "Down." He swung from his horse, pulling Mary with him behind a wagon. Bullets bit wood inches from her face. Her breath came hard, terror pounding through her chest. "Stay low," Ethan ordered, returning fire with a calm precision that made him seem carved from the desert itself. Each shot was deliberate, each movement lean. The bandits pressed closer. Smoke curled through the dry air, mingling with screams and curses. A wagon wheel shattered, spilling crates into the dust. Horses reared, eyes rolling white. Then the wind shifted. At first it was only a whisper, a strange whistle threading through the gunfire. Then it rose, low and guttural, dragging sand into the air. The horizon blurred. The sky darkened with a copper glow. "Storm," Ethan muttered, eyes narrowing. "God help us. It's a storm." Within minutes, the world dissolved into chaos. A wall of sand roared across the desert, swallowing sun and sky. The air turned thick, choking, alive with grit that stung skin and blinded eyes. Mary clung to Ethan's arm, her voice lost in the wind. The storm screamed louder than the gunfire, drowning every sound but its own fury. Bandits and caravan men alike vanished into the maelstrom, reduced to shadowy figures thrashing in a sea of dust. Ethan pulled Mary against him, his hat torn away by the gale. His voice thundered against her ear. "If we don't make it out, remember this. My love is eternal. Even death can't take it from you." Mary's tears vanished into sand. She held his face, memorizing every line, every scar, as if love could carve him into her soul before the storm stole him away. Bullets still flew, unseen until they struck wood or flesh. A cry rang out, "Merchant." "Bandit." Who could tell? Horses bolted, wagons toppled. The desert devoured all. Through the haze, a darker shadow loomed, the bandit leader himself, eyes burning even through the storm, rifle steady. Ethan recognized him. Old betrayal surged between them like lightning. "You!" Ethan hissed, lifting his gun. The storm howled agreement, as if eager for their reckoning. In the heart of the sandstorm, friend and foe vanished alike. Only Ethan and his betrayer stood clear in Mary's eyes, and in that moment, she knew the desert demanded blood before it would return the sky. Every love story meets its trial by fire, or in Redstone's case, by sand and blood. When the storm closed its fists, Ethan faced not just the bandits, but the ghost of his own past. The storm howled like a living beast, tearing at skin and lungs. Sand whipped through the air so thick Mary could barely see Ethan at arm's length. She clung to his sleeve, coughing, eyes burning. Through the murk, a figure advanced broad, merciless, steady despite the gale. The bandit leader. His eyes glowed cruel under the brim of his hat, as if the storm itself obeyed him. Ethan Rhodes, the man bellowed, voice shredded by the wind, but clear enough to pierce. I told you once, you can't walk away from blood. Mary stiffened. Ethan's last name. Something he had never shared. Ethan pulled Mary behind the wreck of a toppled wagon, breath ragged. Stay down, he ordered. His eyes, hard as flint, never left the advancing shadow. The man came closer, gun raised, coat flapping like a dark flag. You rode with us, brother. You profited with us. And then, you turned your back. Now, you pay the price. Ethan stepped forward, revolver steady, his voice cut low, lethal. I paid the price every night since. Tonight, it ends with you. The storm surged, throwing both men into a blurred arena of dust and death. Gunfire erupted. The first shot whined past Ethan's ear. He dropped, rolled, fired back. Sparks jumped from iron, flashes lighting the storm. For split seconds, two figures locked in a deadly dance. Mary pressed against the wagon, heart hammering. Every flash showed Ethan's scar face taut, eyes blazing. Every shot screamed a gamble with fate. The bandit leader circled like a wolf, his laugh shredded by wind. You think you can save her? You can't even save yourself. Another volley wood splintered. Sand sprayed. Ethan grunted, staggered, a red bloom staining his sleeve. Mary cried out, Ethan! But Ethan only tightened his jaw, forced himself upright. He raised his revolver, hands steady though his body trembled. His gaze locked on the leader, unblinking. Mary, he called through the storm, voice fierce. Whatever happens, remember my vow. Mary's throat closed. Tears carved streaks in the dust on her cheeks. She wanted to run to him, shield him. Anything but the storm pinned her helpless. The leader lifted his rifle, grin wide. This is the end. Time seemed to slow. The world shrank to sand, thunder, two guns, and a vow. Ethan fired. The bullet found its mark. The leader's grin froze, then collapsed into the storm. His body vanished into the swirling sand, swallowed as if the desert had been waiting all along. Silence except for the storm's endless roar. Ethan swayed, knees buckling. His revolver slipped from his hand. Blood poured from his shoulder, dark against the pale grit. Mary broke free, running to him. She dropped beside him, pulling his head into her lap. Stay with me. Do you hear me? Stay. Ethan tried to smile. Told you. Trouble doesn't let go easy. He coughed, winced, but I kept my promise. Her tears fell hot onto his dust-caked face. She pressed her forehead to his. Don't you dare leave me now. We survived the storm. We can survive this too. His eyes fluttered, heavy. But still he whispered, If I fall, let my vow carry you. No, she choked. Not your vow, our vow. We walk out together. Lightning cracked somewhere beyond the storm. A reminder that the desert didn't care for bargains. But Mary clutched him tighter, her will screaming against fate itself. The gunfire had ceased. Bandits scattered, blind and broken by wind. The storm itself began to shift, its fury easing, its voice softening from a scream to a growl. Dawn teased the edges of the sky, light straining to break through. Mary refused to let go. One hand pressed against Ethan's wound, the other wrapped around his, fingers locked. His pulse still beat, faint but there. "You're not leaving me," she whispered fiercely. "Not here. Not now." Ethan's lips curved, the ghost of a smile. "Stubborn as hell," he murmured. "Good," she said, "because stubborn saves lives." The storm began to die, but the cost of survival hung heavy. Ethan had defeated his betrayer, but would he survive his wounds? As the sun fought its way over the horizon, Mary realized the hardest battle wasn't against bandits or sand. It was against time. Storms end, but not without leaving scars. As the desert gave back the sun, Mary realized survival was only the beginning. Love itself had to fight for breath. The sandstorm broke apart like a beast out of breath. Winds slowed, carrying away the screams of men who had fled or fallen. Dawn slipped across the desert, golden light spilling into a world battered and raw. Mary knelt in the dust, arms wrapped tight around Ethan. His blood soaked her dress, warm then chilling. Each shallow breath rattled through him like the groan of a door that might not open again. "Stay with me," she begged. "The storm's over. You promised we'd walk out together." Ethan's eyelids fluttered. He looked up at her at the streaks of grit and tears on her face, and for a moment, he seemed to gather strength from her stubborn hope. "You pulled me through," he whispered. "Not my gun, not my grit. Just you." Mary pressed her forehead to his. "Then don't you dare let go now." Caravan survivors stumbled back, ragged silhouettes in the sunrise. Men who had once doubted Ethan now looked at him with awe. He had faced down the leader, saved the wagons, saved them all. One merchant knelt beside Mary. "We'll get him to a doctor. There's a town east 3 hours' ride." Mary shook her head, holding Ethan closer. "He won't survive a rough ride." Ethan coughed, grimacing. "She's right. Let me rest." "No," Mary snapped. "Rest is for men who are done fighting. You're not done." Her voice shook the silence around them. Even the hardened drovers lowered their eyes, ashamed of their doubt. They helped fashion a stretcher from broken wagon boards, laid Ethan carefully upon it. Mary refused to let go of his hand as they moved. Hours dragged like years. The desert gave no mercy. Heat rose. Flies swarmed, but Mary's grip never faltered. She whispered to him with every step, memories, promises, fragments of a future she refused to release. "Remember the moonlit prairie? You said peace might be a person. Then hold on, Ethan. Hold on to me." Each time his eyes dimmed, her words pulled him back. By the time they reached the town, Ethan was unconscious but alive. The doctor, an old man with whiskey breath and steady hands, worked late into the day. Mary waited outside the door, praying, bargaining, promising everything and nothing. At last, the doctor stepped out, wiping his brow. "He'll live if he chooses to." Mary burst inside. Ethan lay pale, bandaged but breathing. She sank to his side, took his hand and whispered, "Choose me, Ethan. Choose us." Slowly, his eyes opened, weak but shining. "Always," he breathed. Weeks later, Redstone welcomed them back, not with suspicion but with respect. Stories spread how Ethan Rhodes had faced his betrayer in a storm fit to tear the earth apart. How Mary had held him against death itself. For once, gossip was a hymn instead of a curse. Ethan healed slowly, carrying scars deeper than flesh. Some nights, he woke shaking, storm still in his lungs. But Mary was always there, whispering him back to calm. Together, They built something fragile, but real, a home made not of walls, but of vows. One evening, months after the storm, they stood again on the open prairie. The sun bled red across the horizon, wind gentle now, brushing the grass like a lullaby. Ethan wrapped an arm around Mary, pulled her close. "I thought I'd die in that storm," he said quietly. "But maybe that's when I was reborn." Mary leaned against him, her smile tender. "Storms don't destroy everything. Sometimes they leave behind what matters most." They stood in silence, the desert vast around them, their shadows stretching long across the earth. The vow spoken in the heart of the sandstorm was never broken. And in a land where love so often ended in blood, Mary and Ethan carved out something defiant, proof that even in the Wild West, love could outlast the storm. Thank you for listening to Western Romance Stories. If you enjoyed this tale of love and danger in the Wild West, give the video a like. Leave your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe for more untamed stories. Until next time, may your odds hold and your heart stay brave.